8 things an intelligent man never says. Stoicism. Old Stoic Wisdom. Welcome to Stoicism Win. If you're here, it's no accident. What we're about to explore could change the way you perceive yourself and the way others perceive you. True intelligence isn't just in what you know, but in what you choose not to say. The truly wise man knows that sometimes silence holds more power than 1,000 well-chosen words. It's about restraint, patience, and wisdom in knowing when to hold back. I've seen it in all kinds of places: boardrooms, barbershops, or even quiet walks under city lights. And what I've realized is this: the most profound men don't rush to speak. They are the ones who listen deeply, reflect, and choose their words with care. They don't feel the need to fill every silence with noise. Instead, they know that a thoughtful pause can say more than any spoken phrase. Here's a truth no one tells you: every word you speak either builds or erodes your credibility. And the smartest men know this. They avoid certain phrases, not because they fear being wrong, but because they've learned, often through hard experience, that some words carry a cost far greater than their value. So today, let's uncover 7 things that wise men simply don't say. Not because they lack the courage to speak up, but because they understand the true price of careless talk. As the Stoics would say, silence is a true friend who never betrays. Let's walk this path of strength, clarity, and reflection together. On. I already know that. One of the most dangerous phrases an intelligent man can say to himself, even if only in the quiet recesses of his mind, is, "I already know that." It might seem harmless, perhaps even confident, but in truth, it is a silent poison that stunts growth. I've said it to myself more times than I care to admit. When someone offers advice or introduces something I think I'm already familiar with, I'd mentally close the door before the conversation even had a chance to unfold. I remember a workshop from years ago when an older speaker was explaining a concept I thought I had mastered. I crossed my arms, tuned out, and mentally dismissed him with a thought: "I've heard this before." But then, in the middle of his presentation, he uttered a single sentence that reframed everything I thought I understood. And I missed it entirely because I was too busy convincing myself that I already knew it all. That night, I had an epiphany. When a man says, "I already know that," he is really saying, "I'm done learning." And that's not intelligence. It's ego dressed in the illusion of knowledge. True wisdom, according to Stoicism, doesn't flatter the ego. It seeks to dismantle it. It constantly reminds us that the moment we stop being students of life, we begin to imprison ourselves in the confines of our own pride. Seneca famously said, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." This isn't just a piece of philosophical wisdom. It's a challenge to us all. I once met a retired Navy officer at a coffee shop. This man, in his 60s, had sharp eyes and a calm demeanour, an aura of quiet strength. We struck up a conversation, and I shared an idea I assumed he'd heard countless times. But instead of brushing it off, he leaned in and asked, "How did you come to that?" I was taken aback. Here was a man who had commanded ships, led men through storms, and yet he still had the humility to ask questions and listen like a beginner. Afterward, he shared with me, "The day I stop being curious is the day I start dying in slow motion." Those words resonated deeply within me. It was a powerful reminder that real intelligence doesn't interrupt to prove itself. It listens, it absorbs, and it waits for new knowledge to emerge. The most intelligent men I know are never in a hurry to display how much they know. They don't correct others mid-sentence or hold their silence just to plan their next opinion. Instead, they treat silence as a place of respect, a space where new ideas can take root. They understand that even the smallest nuance, detail, or shift in perspective holds value. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, "I already know this," take a moment to pause and lean in. You might not be meant to learn the fact you think you know. Rather, you might be meant to learn the perspective. That's what intelligent men understand. Knowledge is not a collection of trophies to be displayed, but a flowing river, constantly changing and evolving. They stay teachable because, in order to grow, one must remain open. And to remain open, you must silence the voice that says, "I already know." What are your thoughts on staying open to learning, even in areas you think you already understand? Feel free to share your perspective in the comments section below. 2. That's impossible. A few years ago, I had the privilege of working alongside a man named Thomas, who had a certain magnetic presence that made others naturally trust his judgment. He was firm, methodical, and always appeared in control. However, there was one phrase he repeated more often than any other. "That won't work." It didn't matter what the idea was, whether it was a suggestion to expand our services, a new marketing approach, or even a simpler method for completing paperwork. His response was always the same. Initially, this seemed like a reasonable, grounded, and practical response, one that reflected caution and careful thought. But after some time, I began to notice something deeper beneath the surface. Thomas wasn't truly evaluating the ideas presented to him. Instead, he was reacting to his own internal fears. Fear of change, fear of failure, and fear of uncertainty were dictating his responses. What he wasn't acknowledging was that he wasn't describing the world or the ideas themselves. He was describing his own limitations. The phrase, "that won't work," had become his defense mechanism, a shield that protected him from the discomfort of the unknown. While it kept him safe from the risk of failure, it also kept him stuck in place, unable to grow or evolve. The Stoics, particularly Seneca, were deeply aware of this kind of reaction. He once wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." Thomas wasn't lazy, nor was he foolish. He was simply afraid of what he couldn't control, and as a result, he stopped trying altogether. It was only years later that I found myself in a situation that seemed even more challenging. Tight deadlines, a reduced budget, and a team that had never worked together before. My first instinct, that familiar voice, wanted to say, "There's no way this is going to work." But instead, I recalled a question from Marcus Aurelius's writings. "What's within your power right now?" That single question became my anchor. What could I control in this moment? What was the smallest, most meaningful action I could take today? By focusing on just the next step, one action at a time, we were able to make steady progress. The project didn't just succeed, it transformed our entire department. Not because we had some brilliant foolproof plan, but because we didn't allow fear to masquerade as logic. When a man says, "That's impossible," he isn't truly talking about the task at hand. He's speaking about his relationship to discomfort and uncertainty. Intelligent men understand that growth lies on the other side of discomfort. They don't shy away from the unknown. Instead, they face it in manageable pieces, with calm, focus, and discipline. They recognize that not seeing the entire path is not a reason to stop moving forward. In fact, it's the very reason to begin the journey. Stoic courage isn't about reckless bravery or acting without thinking. It's about the persistence to continue taking action, even in the face of fear, uncertainty, and adversity. That's what separates the noise of doubt and hesitation from the clarity of purpose and action. Fear whispers, "Wait until it's safe." But wisdom tells us, take the next step anyway. Because when you do, you'll often find that the path wasn't as blocked as you thought. You just hadn't walked far enough to see the way through. If you're ready to break free from fear and move forward with unwavering purpose, comment below right now. I take the next step, no matter the fear. Like this video, subscribe for more timeless wisdom, and remind yourself daily. Real growth happens when you embrace discomfort and keep moving forward. 3. That's not my fault. There's a quiet phrase that slips from a man's mouth in moments of pressure. That's not my fault. At first glance, it may seem innocent, logical even, especially when things go wrong in business, love, or life. It's an instinct to defend oneself, to point out where we weren't responsible. But here's the painful reality. Every time we push away responsibility, we also push away our power to change the outcome. Intelligent men understand this deeply. They've learned that true strength lies not in passing blame, but in taking ownership. Responsibility is not about identifying who made the mistake. It's about retaining influence over what happens next. Because the moment you say, "It wasn't me," you also surrender your ability to shape the future. Take, for instance, a man named Mark Y once worked with. We collaborated on a contract that went wrong. Deadlines were missed, miscommunications ran rampant, and eventually the client walked away. Mark was quick to list all the reasons why it wasn't his fault. The client was disorganized, the market was tough, and the team had failed to deliver. While there was some truth to his claims, what he didn't see was this. By justifying himself, he lost the most important thing, the opportunity to learn from the situation and grow. He repeated the same mistakes in his next project, and the one after that. When you refuse to take ownership of even a small piece of the problem, you forfeit your place in the solution. The Stoics had this wisdom ingrained in their philosophy. As Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." And how you respond begins with ownership. The moment you take responsibility, you reclaim your agency. You stop waiting for others to fix it and start asking, "What could I have done better?" This truth has shaped my own life in profound ways. There were times I wanted to defend myself, times when I was technically right. But when I paused and examined the situation with honesty, I saw the flaws I had ignored, the tone I used, the assumptions I made, the preparation I lacked. When you learn to say, "I could have handled that part better," something within you shifts. It's subtle, yet immensely powerful. You stop being reactive and start being responsible. And it is in responsibility that true strength is forged. Blame is easy. It's cheap. It gets you a moment of relief, a fleeting sense of vindication, but it keeps you stagnant. Responsibility, on the other hand, is weighty. It's uncomfortable, but it builds character, wisdom, and resilience. When you choose responsibility, you not only solve the current problem, but you also become a better man for the next challenge. That's the wisdom that intelligent men live by. They don't wait for someone else to save them. They don't play the victim card. They lead by example, not by finding someone to blame, but by finding a way forward. As Marcus Aurelius said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Those who embrace responsibility are the ones who find a way, no matter the obstacles. So ask yourself, will you keep deflecting responsibility, or will you take control, grow, and lead? Step into your power. Take responsibility and watch your life change. Share this with others, comment below, and let us know how you've taken ownership in your life. Lead the way. 4. I don't need any help. There's a quiet belief that often slips into the minds of many men, almost unnoticed. It doesn't announce itself with a loud bang, but instead whispers in the background, "I've got this. I don't need anyone." On the surface, it feels like strength, self-reliance, independence, and control. We're conditioned to admire this mindset: the lone wolf, the silent warrior, the man who bears his burdens alone. It sounds noble, as if by shouldering every weight, you prove your resilience. But the truth is, this belief doesn't actually make you stronger. It makes you more isolated, more disconnected from those who might be able to help you. The idea that you're weaker if you ask for help, that somehow it diminishes your value as a man, is a myth that keeps many from reaching out when they need support. I remember meeting a man named Jacob years ago. He was in his early 50s, outwardly successful. He owned a business, raised 2 kids on his own, and had earned the respect of his community. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw something no one else seemed to notice: a quiet weariness, a deep fatigue. It wasn't because he was weak. Rather, it was because he had never let anyone see his exhaustion. One evening, over coffee, Jacob shared something that left a lasting impact on me. He said, "For 20 years, I thought being strong meant never letting anyone share my load. I thought if I opened up, I'd look weak, vulnerable, less of a man. Then he paused. But that worked for a while, until it didn't. Until I realized that no one knew how heavy things had gotten because I never gave them the chance to care. That conversation changed me. I had long believed the same thing. Asking for help was a sign of failure, and silence was strength. But the Stoics, those ancient philosophers who emphasized reason, self-discipline, and virtue, knew better. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, regularly wrote in his journals about the mentors, teachers, and friends who had helped him along the way. He didn't pretend to have risen to the top entirely on his own. Instead, he credited his growth to those around him, even to those who challenged him. If the most powerful man in the ancient world could admit that he leaned on others, why do we feel the need to hide behind our pride? The refusal to ask for help doesn't prove we're strong. It proves we're afraid. We're afraid of being seen as vulnerable, afraid of showing weakness, and afraid of losing control. Yet, the real paradox is this. When we allow others to help us, we're not losing power. We're actually expanding it. Connection, mutual support, and cooperation are the things that make us resilient, not simply brute strength. The Stoics didn't preach isolation. While they advocated for self-mastery, they also emphasized the importance of being part of something greater than oneself. As Epictetus famously said, "No man is an island." He meant that no one is truly self-sufficient. We are all part of a broader community. The strongest among us are not those who try to carry every burden alone, but those who recognize when it's time to say, "I can't do this alone." I've been in that place myself, sitting at my desk in the dead of night, overwhelmed by work pressures, family stress, and the endless noise in my mind. I thought, if I just push through, it will get better. But it didn't. It only got quieter and heavier until I finally reached out to someone, a friend, a mentor, or just a sympathetic ear. In that moment, I didn't feel weak. I felt human. What I found in that conversation wasn't judgment, but relief, clarity, a strength redefined. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is not to hold everything inside, but to allow someone else in. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, "I don't need any help," take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself whether that's genuine strength talking, or if it's pride, disguised in armor. True strength doesn't lie in how long you can stand alone. It lies in knowing when to reach for a hand and when to offer yours to someone else. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. As we move through life, it's crucial to remember that we don't have to face everything on our own. Strength isn't about isolation, it's about connection and knowing when to lean on others. It's about being willing to share your burdens, knowing that in doing so, you're not losing control, but rather gaining a more profound understanding of what it means to be truly resilient. If you found this message valuable, comment below and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights. Comment to remember. True strength lies in knowing when to ask for help. 5. I'm too old for that. There's a quiet phrase that has derailed more dreams than failure ever could. It's not shouted in despair or accompanied by tears, but is instead quietly spoken, almost to oneself, often with a tinge of humour. I am too old for that. It's a line we tell ourselves, sometimes half-jokingly, sometimes as a shield to avoid the sting of disappointment. Yet, behind this seemingly harmless phrase lies a deep-rooted resignation. It's not just a momentary thought, but a belief that says, my time has passed. The best parts of life are already behind me. And once this belief takes root, it doesn't just shrink your world of possibilities, it quietly undermines your sense of purpose. You begin to forget that your worth and potential never diminish with age. They merely evolve. I was once struck by a story of a man named David. At 67, he enrolled in a photography course, not because he was seeking a career change, but because he had always dreamed of seeing the world through a different lens. Initially, he felt out of place. The youngest student was in his 20s, and the instructor could have been his child. In those first moments, David almost turned around. I thought to myself, what am I doing here? "This is a young man's game," he admitted. But he stayed. And by the time the course ended, his final project, an evocative series of photographs featuring elderly hands, became the highlight of the class. What moved people wasn't his technical skill. It was his perspective, his courage to defy the notion that his time had passed. He refused to believe that life had nothing more to offer. His belief that he still had something to contribute was what inspired others. This story remains with me because, at its core, "I'm too old" isn't a fact. It's simply a fear dressed in the guise of logic. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often contemplated death, not as something to dread, but as a reminder to live meaningfully to the very end. He didn't ask himself, "How much time do I have left?" But instead he pondered, "What will I do with the time I have remaining?" This shift in perspective is profound. The real question we all must ask ourselves isn't about how much time is left, but what we intend to do with the time that remains. I've witnessed countless men in their 60s reinvent themselves, starting new businesses, picking up painting, falling in love again, or mentoring young men who had never known the guidance of a father. And I've seen men much younger give up on their own potential, believing the best years were already behind them. The one thing that determined their success or failure was never their age. It was their mindset. The man who believes, "I'm too old for that," shuts a door that was never locked to begin with. But the man who asks, "What can I still do?" opens that door wide and walks through with purpose. Stoic wisdom teaches us that growth doesn't retire, it matures. With age, growth becomes more intentional, more focused, and rooted in clarity, not in frantic haste or reckless pursuit. This is the gift of age. You no longer chase after everything. Instead, you choose what truly matters. The experiences you've lived through become your guide, your compass. The scars you've gathered become your stories. And time itself, it becomes your most precious asset. So when you find yourself thinking, "I'm too old," remember that you're not too old. You're simply too valuable to waste the time that remains. Whether you have a decade or just a day left, there's always something to be experienced, shared, or learned. The quiet lie that tells you it's too late is one that steals your future if you let it. Instead, ask yourself, what would I do if I didn't believe it was too late? And then take that first step. Don't let the passing of time convince you to sit on the sidelines. Instead, let it inspire you to be intentional, to engage with life more deeply, and to live with purpose. Your most important years may not be behind you. They may very well be ahead of you. Embrace them. Choose your path and walk it with confidence. If you've made it this far, you've already broken free from the chains of self-doubt and limitation. Most people stay trapped by the belief that time has passed them by, but you're learning that age is just another chapter, not the end of the story. Please comment. Comment. It's never too late to grow. I'm ready for my next chapter. Let's inspire others to do the same. 6. I'll do it later. Few phrases are as deceptively innocent and yet as perilous as "I'll do it later." It appears rational, even responsible, a promise to tackle things when the timing is right. But in reality, later often becomes a grave where our best intentions are buried, unrealized, forgotten, and lost in the flow of time. Let me tell you about a man I once knew, a man named Eric. From the outside, his life seemed perfect. He had a successful career, a loving wife, and 2 sons who adored him. But inside, Eric carried a growing list of unfinished business, things he always promised himself he'd get to. "I'll write that letter next week. I'll take the boys camping when work slows down. I'll fix things with my brother after the holidays." But life waits for no one. One fateful afternoon, Eric received a phone call that changed everything. His brother had passed away in an accident. There was no final conversation, no chance for reconciliation, only the silence of words never spoken and a message that would never be sent. He shared this with me, not to gain sympathy, but as a stark reminder of life's fragility. Time is an illusion we often take for granted, until it runs out. The Stoics understood this truth, And they didn't romanticize time. They saw it for what it truly is: fleeting, unpredictable, and beyond our control. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, would remind himself daily, you could leave life right now. It wasn't a dark thought, but rather a call to clarity, a reminder that every moment counts. Delay doesn't just rob us of opportunities, it steals peace of mind. When we postpone what matters, the call, the apology, the creative idea, it's like carrying a stone in our pocket. We may forget it's there, but it weighs on us, silently shaping how we move through life, how we interact with others, and even how we view the world around us. I've fallen into this trap myself. Letters I meant to send, conversations I told myself would happen when the time was right, all of them accumulated into quiet regrets. Little by little, they piled up until one day I realized I could no longer wait. I took action. I picked up the phone, said what I needed to say, and something shifted inside me. The weight I'd been carrying was gone. It wasn't about fixing everything, but about embracing the fact that time is precious and later is never guaranteed. That's the essence of Stoicism. Not to rush, but to act with intent, to make moves before time forces our hand. You don't need to do everything today, but you need to do what matters, even if it's just one thing. Because the man who waits for perfect timing often finds himself drowning in perfect regret. As Seneca wisely said, the whole future lies in uncertainty. Live immediately. Don't wait for tomorrow. Act now and reclaim your peace. So, I challenge you. What is it that you've been delaying? What conversation, what decision, what important thing will you stop putting off? Do it now, before time does it for you. Because later may never come. If you find today's content useful to you, don't forget to share your feelings and lessons with us. Or simply comment, very cool. It's a great encouragement for our channel makers. Thank you very much. 7. That's just how I am. The phrase, that's just how I am, seems innocuous at first, perhaps even a form of self-awareness or self-acceptance. We've all said it to ourselves at one point, often in moments of frustration or to simply end a conversation. However, this statement, rather than reflecting peace, more often represents a quiet resignation, a decision to stop growing, a subtle surrender to the status quo. Beneath the surface of those 5 words lies the dangerous assumption that change is either impossible or unnecessary, that we are somehow fixed in our ways. I remember a man I worked with years ago named Neil, who exemplified this mindset. He was exceptionally skilled at his job, fiercely independent, but he had a notorious temper. He would snap at teammates, raise his voice in meetings, and storm out when things didn't go his way. When one of his colleagues finally confronted him about his behaviour, Neil simply shrugged and said, "That's who I've always been." In his mind, his temperament was an immutable part of his identity, a permanent and unchangeable trait. But herein lies the flaw. What we do repeatedly, what we allow ourselves to get away with over time, becomes part of our identity, not because it's who we truly are, but because we stop questioning it. The Stoics, whose wisdom has stood the test of time, understood this fundamental truth. Character is not fixed. It is not something we're born with, nor is it determined by past experiences. Character is formed by our actions, choices, and reflections, by the conscious effort we make every single day. As Epictetus, a great Stoic philosopher, wisely said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." This means that the beliefs we hold about ourselves, the narratives we tell ourselves, shape the very way we experience the world. In this context, saying, "That's just how I am," is nothing more than a story we've crafted that limits our potential for growth. Change is inherently uncomfortable. It pulls us out of our familiar routines, even if those routines no longer serve us. But growth doesn't come from comfort. It requires courage, the courage to face uncomfortable truths, to ask hard questions like, is this really who I am? Or, is this just what I've become accustomed to? I've had to ask myself these questions in the past. For example, Years ago, I had a tendency to shut down whenever someone challenged my ideas, not out of anger, but out of fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of losing respect, fear of being seen as imperfect. I used to tell myself, that's just how I think, as if my mindset was set in stone. But it wasn't. What I was really doing was avoiding the discomfort that comes with change, vulnerability, humility, and the effort required to improve. But it's through those uncomfortable experiences that wisdom is born. Intelligent men don't shy away from change. They don't run from the hard work that growth demands. They face it head-on, not because they despise who they are, but because they respect themselves enough to refuse to stay stuck. Stoicism teaches that self-mastery isn't about reaching perfection. It's about persistence. You don't accidentally become wise. Wisdom is earned through consistent effort, through showing up every day and asking yourself, what can I do better today? Even when it's uncomfortable. It's in this day-by-day process of self-examination that we shape our identity, not through grand declarations, but through small, deliberate choices. So now, when I hear someone say, that's just how I am, I no longer hear acceptance or self-awareness. Instead, I hear fear. I hear exhaustion, the exhaustion that comes from trying and failing, only to retreat into the comfort of complacency. This phrase often marks the moment when someone has given up on the idea of progress, without realizing that the most human thing we can do is try. To live is to change. Nature itself is in constant motion. Life is change. We resist change at our peril, for in doing so, we resist the very force that keeps us alive, the force that drives us toward our best selves. If you've ever found yourself saying, that's just how I am, know this. You are not fixed. You are not stuck. You are always in motion, and where you go from here begins with the decision you make right now. So, I urge you to reflect on your own life. What have you accepted as unchangeable about yourself? What parts of your identity have you stopped challenging? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about how we can each embrace growth, face discomfort, and strive for improvement in all aspects of our lives. 8. I can't change who I am. There's a quiet, yet pervasive belief that often takes root in the minds of those struggling with personal growth or self-improvement. I can't change who I am. At first glance, this might seem like a statement of acceptance, a form of self-awareness, and even a sense of peace with one's nature. But beneath this seemingly innocent phrase lies a deeper, more limiting belief. A belief that, once internalized, locks us into a version of ourselves that we think is unchangeable. We tell ourselves that the habits we've formed, the beliefs we hold, the way we react to situations, and even the way we view the world are somehow fixed and unalterable. I'm just this way becomes a convenient excuse, a shield that prevents us from pushing forward and confronting our true potential. I've encountered this mindset in many people, and I've seen it in myself at times as well. It's a way to avoid the discomfort of change. It's easier to believe that we are who we are and that we cannot be any different. But here's the truth. This belief is not only false, but it is also a trap that keeps us from evolving. The Stoics were clear about the nature of change. It's not only possible, it's an essential part of life, and in fact, it's necessary for growth. To deny that we can change is to deny the most fundamental aspect of human nature, our ability to adapt, learn, and grow. Take, for instance, a man I once knew named Jack. Jack was an intelligent and capable individual, but he carried with him a heavy sense of cynicism and bitterness. He would often tell others, I can't change who I am, as a justification for his negative mindset. Whenever someone would offer him advice or a different perspective, he would dismiss it with a wave, convinced that he was simply wired a certain way. Jack had been through a lot in life. Hardships, disappointments, betrayals, and somewhere along the way, he made the decision that he could not alter his worldview. The pattern was set, and he allowed himself to believe that his past defined his future. This belief that, I can't change who I am often arises from deep-seated fears. Fear of failure, fear of vulnerability, and fear of the unknown. When we resist change, we create a sense of security in remaining the same, but that security is only an illusion. The Stoics understood that change is inevitable, and it is not something to fear, but something to embrace. Marcus Aurelius, for example, frequently reflected on the idea that life is in constant motion, and that it's our responsibility to grow in accordance with this natural flow. Life is flux, he would remind himself. We are never the same person from one moment to the next. Our experiences shape us, and the choices we make in every moment influence who we become. This truth was hard for Jack to accept. However, his story changed when he faced a life-altering event that forced him to rethink his beliefs. After years of holding on to his cynicism, Jack hit a point of crisis. His relationships were strained, his work was suffering, and he felt increasingly isolated. One day, he came to me in a moment of rare vulnerability. "I thought I could never change," he said, "but I'm realizing that this way of living isn't working anymore. I don't want to stay like this, but I don't know where to start." It was in this moment of honesty, in the recognition that his old way of thinking wasn't serving him, that Jack made the decision to embark on the journey of change. It wasn't an instant transformation, but it was a start. Jack began to challenge his assumptions, his patterns of thinking, and his reactions. He asked himself hard questions. Why do I believe this about myself? Is it true? What would happen if I chose to think differently? Through this process, he began to break free from the limitations he had imposed on himself. He discovered that change is not a sudden, grand event, but a series of small, deliberate steps that accumulate over time. In my own life, I faced moments when I too believed that change was impossible, that my nature was fixed, and that I was just the way I am. I had a tendency to be impatient and reactive in stressful situations. I often told myself, "This is just how I am," as a way to excuse my behavior. But the moment I began to examine that belief critically, I realized that it was not a truth. It was a defense mechanism, a shield to protect my ego from the discomfort of transformation. I learned that the Stoic way is not to resist change, but to embrace it as a natural part of life. Change is growth, and growth requires that we constantly challenge ourselves, that we strive to be better, to learn from our mistakes, and to push ourselves beyond the limits we've created for ourselves. This idea of being fixed is a dangerous illusion that prevents us from living with intention. It keeps us stuck in patterns that don't serve us, that limit our potential, and that keep us from living a fulfilling life. The Stoics would say that the essence of life is to evolve, to question, and to persist through adversity. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote that no man is free who is not master of himself, and mastery over oneself requires the willingness to change, to adapt, and to shed old habits that no longer serve us. True strength is not in holding on to who we were, but in embracing the possibility of who we can become. It is about being open to the idea that we are not bound by our past actions or beliefs. Our identity is not fixed. It is fluid, ever-changing, and always evolving. To say, "I can't change who I am," is to deny the incredible power we all have to shape our future. Change may be uncomfortable, but it is through discomfort that we grow. It is through facing our fears, challenging our assumptions, and stepping into the unknown that we discover the strength to transform. The Stoics teach us that we are not our circumstances. We are not our past mistakes. We are the sum of our choices, and those choices are always in our hands. The moment we embrace change is the moment we reclaim our power. So I ask you, what parts of yourself have you accepted as unchangeable? What beliefs about yourself have you held on to, thinking that they are fixed? The truth is, you have the power to change. The question is not, can I change who I am? But rather, what kind of person do I want to become? That is the question that can set you free. Change begins with the decision to evolve, to step into the unknown, and to take the first step forward. The path may not always be easy, but it is always worth it. So if you find yourself saying, "I can't change who I am," take a moment to reflect. It's not a statement of peace, it's a limitation. And if you are ready, let it go. Embrace the journey of change and watch as your life transforms. Thank you for being here and taking the time to reflect with me. It's not every day that we pause and really think about the deeper things in life, so I appreciate you sharing this moment of stillness with me. What we discussed today isn't just theoretical, it's a way of living, a path that each of us can choose to walk, even if it's just one small step at a time. The wisdom we explored comes from centuries of thoughtful individuals who understood the value of silence, self-control, and careful reflection. It's about saying less, but meaning more. Being decisive with our actions and intentional with our words. I know life can be overwhelming at times, and the noise of the world can drown out our inner voice. But here's the truth. The most intelligent people aren't the ones who speak the loudest. They're the ones who understand that silence and stillness are where the real power lies. It's in those quiet moments that we hear the truths we need to move forward. So if something in this video sparked a quiet thought or resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who may be walking their own quiet path, someone who could use that same reminder. We all need a little encouragement now and then, and it could mean the world to someone else to know they're not alone in their journey. And, if you haven't already, I encourage you to subscribe, not for the noise or for the endless distractions, but for the gentle reminders that stillness holds incredible power. In a world that moves too fast, let's be a little slower. Let's be more intentional with our time, our words, and our actions. Subscribe to remind yourself that wisdom often speaks in whispers, not shouts. I'll meet you in the next reflection, where we'll continue to explore these timeless ideas and work towards living with greater purpose and clarity. Until then, take care of yourself, cherish the quiet moments, and remember, the world may try to rush you, but you are the one who sets the pace. Peace and strength come from within, and you have all the power to embrace it. I look forward to our next conversation. See you soon.